In One Piece chapter 1116, the ancient weapons are discussed, the location of the broadcast snail is revealed, and the Pirate King's legacy continues. The cover page continues Yamato's pilgrimage across Wano. Yamato receives some medicine and dumplings from Otsuru. At first glance, I thought this was a devil fruit, but it's just a wrapped up bundle, and it looks like Yamato has no shortage of admirers. The world was still reacting to Dr. Vegapunk's words. The notion of weapons that can sink the world still being around was frightening, not to mention the revelation that the Void Centuries War is not over, despite their belief that no one from that time period could possibly still be alive. Yet one such figure made its way through a chamber littered by flowers. Imu looked up towards the portrait of a woman who looked very similar to Vivi. All things considered, this may very well be Nefertari D. Lily. The people couldn't believe that such a war was still being waged in secrecy. There was an outcry of the good doctor's name. Stella looked glum as he prepared to continue. Igaram sadly clutched onto a stack of papers as Karu cried behind him. The big man cried himself as he looked down at the missing person posters they had for Vivi. Meanwhile, the late king of Alabasta was laid to rest. Dr. Vegapunk deeply apologized to the world ahead of his impending confession. He admitted that one of his goals had always been to create an energy source that would fuel the development of society. For the moment, it was still unfinished. But even still, the doctor was very proud of his creation, known as the Mother Flame. There was no doubt in his mind that its inexhaustible energy would allow the world to live in abundance one day, a prospect that delighted those who might need it the most. And since the broadcast was intended to be released upon his death, he probably expects the various satellites to continue the work in his place. But the path toward this goal has taken a very unfortunate turn, because a very small piece of the Mother Flame had been stolen. Stella took complete responsibility for this terrible development. At the same time, the Marines were trying to figure out what to do about these Cypherpole agents that were surrounded by flames in the middle of the island. After the artificial clouds were split in two by Nusjuro, Stussy contacted Edison, wondering if he knew what was happening. The small robot was just as shocked as she was. The entire basement collapsed, and he couldn't make any more clouds for the Straw Hats to use. Stussy wondered how such a thing could have possibly happened, as Snake is still inside of her capture bubble, so I assume that's still the case for the other Seraphim too. Edison took it as a sign that another Elder was on their way upwards. Again, he urged Stussy to secure her own safety, but the double agent was in the midst of an inner conflict. She hesitantly wondered if it would be okay for her to free Kaku, something that came across as a shock to both the CP0 agent and Edison. Stussy told him that she didn't want Kaku to suffer for her decisions. She wouldn't let him go after the Straw Hats and didn't expect that to be his priority anyways. Edison remained silent for a bit. Then he agreed to her request and apologized for what he had put her through. He hadn't considered the possibility that Stussy was genuinely friends with her fellow agents. Edison then asked her to forgive him for making her double-cross them. A look of sadness overtook Kaku's face. Although she had been split between two sides, Edison was grateful that she still decided to rescue them. He claimed that her inner conflict was proof of her humanity, which makes me wonder what that says about his humanity. Edison didn't mind whatever she wanted to do so long as she finds a way to continue living. The somber clone smiled and cried as she agreed. Stella's mood changed as he mentioned what happened 2 weeks after the Mother Flame fragment was stolen. An intense glow was detected above the kingdom of Lulusia, a mention that caught the attention of its former denizens currently in the Kamabaka Queendom. After this detection, Dr. Vegapunk learned that the entire country had been annihilated without a trace of its previous existence. And not long afterwards, earthquakes were detected all over the world. Vice Admiral Kamil couldn't believe that an ancient weapon had done such a thing. Vegapunk admitted that his pride as a scientist may be at play, but he was rather certain of one thing. Only his Mother Flame could provide the vast amount of energy required to do such a thing. The refugee from before cried as she wondered why someone would do such a thing to her home. In the Proden's kingdom, King Elisabello II was shocked by the revelation of Lulusia's destruction, as it was the first time he was hearing about it. He swiftly ordered Dagama to confirm the truth. Dr. Vegapunk reiterated that his own invention was used as a power source for an ancient weapon. Stella dropped down to his knees and deeply bowed, with his head hitting the ground. He didn't know who did it or why, but ultimately, one thing was certain. he was an accessory to an act of genocide. Words could hardly express the remorse he felt for his part in all this. And this further likens Dr. Vegapunk to the real-world inspiration for the character, Albert Einstein, a genius whose work was weaponized by governmental forces and ultimately played a part in the creation of the atomic bomb. A man commonly revered the world over for his intellect and scientific contributions that may also be viewed as a symbol of infamy. With his head low, Stella believed that this news provided additional plausibility to his claims that the disaster that flooded the world was not natural. Some people felt bad for the longtime philanthropist and claimed it wasn't his fault. A shocked Momonosuke suddenly blurted something out about the ancient weapon he was most familiar with, Pluton. Something that Kinemon immediately sought to hush. And it's always funny to see how massive Momonosuke is these days. We then received a shot of Crocodile as Dr. Vegapunk mentioned the 3 ancient weapons. As, of course, securing Pluton was Mr. Zero's greatest ambition. Dr. Vegapunk then revealed that the passage of the ancient weapons to future generations was one of Joy Boy's intentions. At the same time, we'd see the ancient weapon Poseidon in the form of Princess Shirahoshi. Stella could only wonder why this was, especially considering the fact that the world had already suffered such extreme flooding. These looming questions made it very difficult to definitively refer to either side as good or evil. But the doctor insists that the day of answers is inevitable. And it almost feels like Oda is talking to us directly here. Sengoku was frantically stuffing his face with rice crackers, to the point where Tsuru had to warn him about choking. Dr. Vegapunk then issued a warning to the entire world, that when the time comes, they all need to fear the possibility of a sunken world. Regardless of whatever side they may end up being on, this is a threat that looms over them all. And although the Void Century remains an enigma, Dr. Vegapunk is certain that there are people who know the entire unabridged story. We are then brought to Marine headquarters. Fleet Admiral Akainu was literally fuming. He insisted that Vegapunk explain everything. And this is a very peculiar reaction indeed. Admittedly, we don't know a whole lot about this guy's background, so it could very easily be connected to that. But being such a hardcore warrior, I'd imagine that the revelation of such a secret war getting past him must be infuriating. He's likely to pursue whatever lead is presented, doing so with his own concept of justice in mind. Dr. Vegapunk then frankly declared that the former members of the Pirate King's crew were one such group in the know. The Marines were overwhelmed with shock. Korkus, a former member of the Roger Pirates himself, remained in silent contemplation as the whole world wondered how and why pirates would be privy to such sensitive information. The people of the Long Arm tribe were in an uproar as they feared the ramifications of such a thing. Meanwhile, Vegapunk York was shocked by these revelations too. She wondered how her creator could have possibly known about her theft of a Mother Flame fragment. She stopped her memory synchronization with her fellow Vegapunks, so it shouldn't have been possible. She also knows that Stella is a really bad actor and liar. And when she revealed herself while he was imprisoned, he seemed to be genuinely surprised by her betrayal. She thought about how he learned about Lulusia and took readings. Her frustrations only grew as she mentioned how the timeline wasn't adding up. York was now certain that Stella must have been aware of what the world government was planning. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone to such lengths. He wouldn't have hidden the broadcast snail. While she contemplated, Jupiter continued his vacuum cleaner routine and dragged a number of Cyberpol agents into his gullet, perhaps as a means of securing them. York quickly got in contact with the various elders. She managed to figure out the location of the broadcast snail. Mars wondered if she was sure. And there was no doubt in York's mind as a fellow Vegapunk. The broadcast snail is apparently in the Fabrial Stratum, being guarded by the Iron Giant. To stop this spread of information, the opposing sides of this ancient war will need to go into overtime with a full-blown kaiju showdown. Although Vegapunk was unable to recreate the machine, Shaka admitted that the issue was its power source. So although Luffy's Gear 5 transformation seemed to coincide with the robot's activation, it's far more plausible that the Mother Flame was utilized in its revival, which would certainly line up with the notion of Stella's prior awareness of impending events. Or perhaps, the awareness of punk records itself. Oda is a master of his craft. Dialogue is never wasteful and always serves a purpose. When St. Mars made it to Punk Records, he wondered if the severed brain was the true Vegapunk. He wondered if the Doctor's consciousness was housed within. And I am under the impression that this thing is literally the mastermind. The fact that the Gorosei will be fighting the Iron Giant makes me fear that Vegapunk's broadcast will be cut off on a cliffhanger even more. But the robot is capable of speech, so hopefully a few key words will be exchanged. Dr. Vegapunk was sure that the Roger Pirates knew the entirety of their world's lost history, so he wondered why they decided to just fade away without revealing said information. Furthermore, why didn't they act? Over on Sabaody, Shaki called out to her husband. While the former queen dragged an unconscious pirate out of their establishment, she mentioned Rayleigh's heavy drinking, and the fact that he doesn't usually get this wasted. Slumped over the counter, the old man called himself washed up. He compared himself to Dr. Vegapunk as a fellow blabbering geezer who has already said way too much. He urged the genius not to be a party pooper and take this away from the younger generations. The former first mate placed his drink on the table. He claimed that the thrill was now theirs to seek, while reminiscing about his late captain. And we are also reminded that those who knew the truth laughed. So, will more pressure be placed on these retired pirates? I mean, they may be old, but Rayleigh is still the Dark King. They haven't done much to him thus far, but maybe this will just inflate the legend of Buggy the Clown even more. Not that he actually knows the truth, of course. Even without the face of a single Straw Hat in this chapter, Oda still has us all on the edge of our seats. We are practically swimming in revelations at this point. And I'm curious what you guys think is the craziest one from this chapter. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.